Hey guys, tonight we're walking barefoot through a garden where geometry cools the air, where wind follows patterns carved by human hands, and where water doesn't just flow, it whispers. We're talking about ancient Persian gardens, those meticulously planned green spaces set against some of the hottest, driest landscapes on Earth. But here's the twist. The gardeners weren't just worried about keeping the roses alive, they were basically engineering little slices of paradise, complete with climate control and passive air conditioning. It's like an ancient spa designed by a math nerd with a soft spot for figs. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your location and the local time in the comments if you're still awake. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the caravan road, dust still clinging to your sandals, the air heavy with sun and silence. Before you, tucked behind a tall wall of sun-baked brick, is something that doesn't belong in the desert. Green, lush, shaded. You press a hand to the gate and step inside, and suddenly the temperature drops. Not drastically, but noticeably, like someone took the edge off a long sigh. You feel it in your shoulders first, then behind your ears, and finally across your brow where the sun's weight had been pressing for hours. The light is different here. It's fractured by lattice and leaf, sliced by pomegranate branches and fig vines trained deliberately to cast just enough shadow. Not too much, never too much. Every inch of this place was designed to feel like relief. This is a Persian Shahar Bagh, a four-part garden whose name literally means four gardens, structured around symmetry and serenity. The plan is always the same: a central water source, often a shallow pool or spring, from which four paths radiate outward like compass points. Each path divides a quadrant, and each quadrant is filled with trees, shrubs, and patterned flower beds laid out with the kind of care usually reserved for manuscript illumination. You don't get lost here. You don't want to. You walk slowly. Everything invites you to move like water. Mainstream historical fact. The concept of the Shahar Bagh dates back to the Achaemenid Empire around the 6th century BCE and carried strong symbolic meaning. These gardens were designed to represent paradise on Earth, a microcosm of harmony between humanity, nature, and the divine. The layout mirrored ancient Zoroastrian ideals of balance, with flowing water representing life and order, while the quadrant structure embodied control over nature's chaos. You stroll along one of the four paths, your feet brushing crushed gravel that crunches softly underfoot. Each step sends a puff of rose-scented air toward your nose, intentional of course. The roses were planted near the walking paths so they'd release fragrance when jostled by breeze or brush. You glance down to find water channels flanking the walkway. Narrow runnels just a few inches deep, lined with smooth tile and polished stone. The water is moving. Barely. It's more of a glide than a flow, and yet you feel it on your skin, like the difference between standing beside a fountain and standing beside a whisper. It cools the air subtly, like nature's air conditioning set to low and poetic. The walls around the garden are tall and thick, made of adobe or stone, depending on the region. They're not just barriers, they're part of the climate control system. Their job is to block wind, trap cool air, and cast shade during the hottest hours of the day. They hold in the quiet too. You can hear birdsong echoing faintly, doves maybe, a soft looped lullaby that disappears if you walk too fast. So you don't. Fringe tidbit. Some Persian garden walls were embedded with ceramic shards or small mirrors, tiny glints of reflection meant to scatter sunlight and deter intruders, yes, but also to dazzle visitors. The mirrored sparkles gave the impression that the garden had captured pieces of the sky itself, flickering just behind the fig leaves. You pause beneath an archway of cypress trees, their tops meeting to form a vaulted canopy overhead. The air here is thick with the scent of resin and damp stone. You can feel the sun's absence, not just its heat, but its noise. There's a certain silence to shade in a place like this. It's not empty, it's layered. You hear water trickling, bees buzzing lazily, the creak of a branch somewhere in the distance. No one hurries. There's no need. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were primarily utilitarian, spiritual, or political spaces. Some scholars emphasize their symbolic ties to paradise and the afterlife, while others note their very practical role in demonstrating power and wealth. Who else could conjure a lush oasis in the middle of a desert? But perhaps it was always both, a display of dominion over nature and a quiet retreat into something deeper than control. Something like peace. You pass a grape arbor, its vines trained across a low trellis that filters the light like latticework, casting shifting patterns on the path ahead. The shade here feels almost playful. The sunlight dances in little patches across your skin, and the grapes themselves, still firm and green, dangle like tiny chandeliers. A cat watches you from a tiled ledge, half asleep, eyes barely slitted open. You nod at each other, in agreement that no one is going anywhere quickly. A light joke flutters in your thoughts. If modern office buildings were laid out like Persian gardens, you'd never make it to your desk. Too busy wandering through lavender hedges, arguing with a peacock about deadlines. And honestly, that sounds fine. You stop to sit by the central pool. It's a shallow rectangle, no more than a few feet deep, lined with glazed blue tiles that shimmer even in the shade. The water is still except for the occasional ripple caused by a breeze or a falling leaf. And yet it's not stagnant. Beneath the surface, unseen channels keep it gently moving. You dip your hand into the water, and the coolness climbs up your wrist like silk. You wonder how many hands have done this before you. How many generations of thinkers, poets, and travelers rested in this exact spot, letting the garden teach them about patience. You lie back, the stone warm against your shoulders, the air still, the sun filtered through fig leaves, and somewhere nearby the water keeps gliding, the breeze keeps curving, and the cat probably hasn't moved at all. You've only just begun this journey, but already the garden has done its work. Not by changing anything, just by being. You rise slowly from the warm stone ledge, your hand drying in the breeze as the garden gently reshapes itself around your motion. The pool behind you barely notices. A single petal floats by, carried not by current but by intention. Or so it feels. The path to your left bends around a thick hedge of jasmine, its scent curling through the air in lazy spirals. You follow it instinctively, drawn by the hush that lives between plant and wall, shade and shimmer. Here, everything is precise without feeling rigid. The symmetry is soothing, like tracing lines in sand with your fingertip. No edge too sharp, no corner without softness. This is design that listens. You pause where four paths meet. This is the true heart of the Shahar Bagh, the intersection where the central fountain or spring often lies. You notice that each quadrant is slightly different, one filled with citrus trees, another heavy with climbing roses, a third covered in neat rows of herbs, and the last anchored by a shaded pavilion. The layout is not accidental. This is a garden built on philosophy, not just aesthetics. The garden doesn't just look balanced, it functions that way too. Mainstream historical fact. The four-part garden layout was deeply symbolic, often mirroring spiritual cosmology. In Zoroastrian and later Islamic Persian interpretations, the four quadrants represented the elements: earth, water, fire, air, or the four rivers of paradise. The intersection of these paths, often marked by water, was seen as the center of the world, the axis mundi. This design was not decorative, it was theological landscaping. You walk slowly along one of the arms, the path flanked by sun-warmed bricks and a shallow stream no wider than your foot. The water is almost motionless, though you can hear the faintest gurgle beneath its surface. This is the genius of Persian hydraulics, nothing flashy, just quiet mastery. The water doesn't rush, it glides. It's been directed here not by force but by math. Measured slope, careful angles, centuries of tinkering with gradient until flow becomes calm. You glance down and notice tiny fish, silver and gold slivers darting through the channel. They're here not for decoration alone. They keep the water clean, eating larvae and algae, contributing to the equilibrium like unpaid but very elegant janitors. You step through a low stone arch into the citrus quadrant. The temperature shifts again. Even in the dry air, the scent of orange blossom clings to your skin, and above you, branches stretch to create pockets of shadow where the light filters in slowly, like the garden is pouring it out by the spoonful. Some of the trees lean at odd angles, supported by wooden props, evidence of age and care, not neglect. The fruit dangles overhead, not quite ripe, and the leaves shimmer with a waxy sheen that catches the light just enough to glow. Fringe tidbit. In some Persian estates, gardeners were trained to arrange fruiting trees by ripening sequence, apricots first, then peaches, followed by citrus. This created a slow seasonal unfolding of color and scent, allowing the garden to feel new every few weeks. It wasn't just practical, it was theatrical. The garden didn't change all at once, it performed. At the far end of the quadrant, a narrow bench of white marble waits in the shade. You sit without hesitation. The stone is cool beneath you, smooth but not slippery, and for a moment you feel like part of the garden's choreography. A breeze slides through the trees, and above you, a dove flutters from one branch to another, stirring the silence just enough. You let your eyes close. You don't fall asleep, but you do drift, mentally, like a leaf on one of the slow streams winding through the quadrants. Historians still argue whether these gardens were intended primarily for private reflection, public display, or ceremonial use. Some texts describe royal receptions and poetry recitals held in garden courtyards, while others suggest they were sanctuaries of solitude for philosophers and mystics. Likely they were all of these. the Persian garden didn't limit itself to one mood. It flexed to match its visitor. A ruler saw power, a monk saw order, a traveler saw refuge. And you see calm. You rise and continue toward the pavilion. Its columns are slender, painted in faded earth tones, and the tiled floor beneath them glows with reflected light. The roof extends just far enough to provide full shade at high noon, while the open sides allow cross breezes to pass through unhindered. You step inside and the air shifts again, cooler, cleaner, as though the structure filters not just wind, but worry. A light joke dances in your mind. If you installed a Persian pavilion in your backyard, your productivity would plummet, but your poetry output would triple. 0 meetings, all metaphors. You lie down on the stone bench beneath the central arch. The ceiling above you is decorated with faded stars, blues and golds flaking gently away with time. A single hummingbird zips through the open space, pauses in midair as if judging your vibe, and then disappears toward the herbs. Somewhere nearby, a stream continues its quiet narration, and you realize you're not tracking time anymore, not in minutes, not in hours, only in shadows. You think back to the garden's entrance, the blinding sun just outside the wall, and how strange it seems now that you rushed to get here. The garden doesn't ask for speed, it rewards stillness. You've only explored a fraction of it, and yet you feel like you've been here forever. Not in the exhausting sense, but the way you feel when you return somewhere you didn't realize you missed. The breeze shifts again, and a few jasmine petals fall across the path. You watch them land, spin slightly, and settle without sound. And still, the water glides. You rise from the bench with the slow, stretched limbs of someone who's just remembered they have nowhere urgent to be. The garden doesn't mind. It never does. As you return to the central path, the light has softened even more, slipping between leaves like silk pulled through rings. You round the fountain again, its surface now dappled with more shadow than sun, and take the opposite path this time, toward the outer edge of the garden, where the breeze grows bolder and the trees give way to walls once again. But this isn't a place of endings. It's a place of containment, and that makes all the difference. You come to stand before one of the garden's high, sun-baked walls. Up close, it's more than just a barrier. It's a heat sink, a windbreak, and perhaps unexpectedly, a tool of design. The wall doesn't just block the sun, it guides the entire atmosphere of the garden. You press your palm to it. It's warm, but not blazing. The mud brick beneath your fingers holds the day's heat gently, not as a threat, but as a memory. Inside these walls, everything was considered. Their height, their placement, their angle to the sun, they create pockets of shadow that shift with the day, rotating in soft arcs across the garden like silent sundials. Mainstream historical fact: Persian garden walls were integral to temperature control. Their height and material were chosen specifically to moderate heat, block desert winds, and provide long stretches of midday shade. In many cases, the orientation of the garden was planned to maximize this effect, with walls absorbing sunlight during the day and releasing warmth after sundown, an early form of thermal regulation. You turn and look along the base of the wall, where vines curl and creep, deliberately trained to follow the stone in slow, silent spirals. You spot climbing roses, their pale blooms brushing gently against stucco, and trailing jasmine perfuming the very edge of the air. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. The gardeners of Persia didn't just water plants, they sculpted them, guided them, bent light and shadow to their will. A small alcove juts out from the wall, tiled with faded turquoise and cobalt, offering a shaded seat that captures the breeze like a palm cupped toward the wind. You step into it and sit. The air here feels different, cooler, slightly fragrant, moving not in gusts but in streams. And it's not just luck, it's engineering. Fringe tidbit: some Persian gardens use slanted walls and recessed alcoves to deliberately funnel wind into sitting areas. These designs acted like giant passive air conditioners, pulling in cooler air from shaded zones and circulating it around courtyards. The principle was so effective that it later influenced courtyard architecture across the Islamic world, from Morocco to Mughal India. As you lean back against the tiled wall, the breeze brushes your cheeks and neck like a careful hand. Above, a latticework trellis holds back the harshest rays, letting just a few shafts of gold pierce through, spotlighting motes of dust that float like drifting stars. You close your eyes for a moment, and in that space of hush, you hear everything: the rustle of leaves, the hiss of wind through reed, the pulse of water whispering in its channels. Time here isn't told in hours, it's told in shadows. Historians still argue whether the Persian garden was meant to be static or seasonal, whether it was a stage set in timeless perfection or a living place that changed and aged like its visitors. Some say the layout symbolized eternal paradise, untouched by decay. Others argue that its very brilliance lay in its constant reinvention, pruning, reseeding, adjusting for climate and whim. But you're inclined to believe both. Perfection doesn't have to mean stillness. Sometimes it just means balance. You stand again and follow the wall's curve to a narrow passage, just wide enough for one person at a time, leading to what looks like another quadrant, hidden behind a trimmed hedge. As you pass through, the air shifts again, and you find yourself in a quieter part of the garden. Not silent, just secluded. This area is simpler, fewer flowers, more shade. Here, the walls loom closer, and the plants are chosen not for show but for shadow. This is where the garden becomes cool, literally and figuratively. The walls reflect only slivers of sunlight. The breeze comes in low and steady, helped by a trick of geometry that you're starting to notice. The walls are slightly higher on this side, and the paths curve inward, narrowing airflow and concentrating coolness. You inhale, and the air here tastes faintly of damp stone and mint. A narrow channel runs along the edge, fed by an unseen source, its surface so still it could pass for a strip of glass. Every now and then, a droplet falls from a nearby leaf, sending out tiny ripples. You dip your fingers in, and the water is cold. Not tepid, not lukewarm, cold. The kind of chill that makes your skin tighten, then relax. A light joke flickers through your mind. If Persian garden design were taught in modern HVAC classes, your next apartment might come with a grape arbor and built-in breeze settings, zero thermostat, full ambiance. You wander to a corner where an open grate lies embedded in the stone path. Looking down, you see not darkness, but motion, water flowing beneath your feet, clear and fast, hidden beneath the garden like a buried stream. This is part of the Qanat system, the underground veins that keep this whole ecosystem alive. You kneel beside the grate and listen. The sound is constant, purposeful, a secret river. You follow the channel's edge to a low, arched doorway cut into the garden's far wall. It's barely marked, just a shift in stone, a suggestion of passage. You step through, and on the other side, the world opens again. Another garden, quieter still, where shade pools in wide bowls of silence and the breeze moves in circles, not lines. And always, the water flows. You pass through that low archway like you've entered the pause between thoughts, a pocket of air untouched by urgency. The temperature dips once more, not sharply, but with the same steady confidence as someone pulling the edge of a curtain at just the right angle to block the sun before you stretches a new quadrant. And yet it feels older somehow, not neglected, just aged into gentleness. The trees here grow taller, denser, their limbs curling inward like they're sheltering something sacred. And in a way they are, shade. Deep, dappled, deliberate shade. You walk slowly along the perimeter, the path narrowing between walls, now partly overtaken by ivy and climbing honeysuckle. The sunlight barely touches the stone here, and where it does, it glows rather than shines, diffused by foliage and filtered through lattice. The air is thicker, richer, the kind of coolness that smells faintly of crushed mint and damp clay. You pause beneath an ancient sycamore, its bark flaking in curling ribbons, and tilt your face upward. Its canopy sways in rhythm with the breeze, which has followed you loyally, still polite enough not to make a fuss. This is not dramatic wind, this is architected airflow. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Persian gardens didn't rely solely on plants and water to keep cool. They also employed wind as a vital design element. Structures were carefully aligned with prevailing breezes, and trees were positioned to guide airflow along specific paths. The use of open corridors, narrow shade alleys, and wide canopies helped manage both temperature and air movement without any mechanical tools. This wasn't just landscaping. It was meteorology with roses. As you continue deeper into the shaded quadrant, the shape of the space reveals itself more slowly. Here, unlike the symmetry of the central fountain area, there's asymmetry. Paths that bend gently around tree trunks, benches placed slightly off-center, like the garden is encouraging you to meander. You pass a small vine-covered trellis beneath which a bench of pale stone sits. It's barely visible in the shadows, as though the garden wants to be sure you really see it before you rest. You do. You sit down and immediately your body understands. This is why the bench was placed here. The breeze, previously wandering, now moves across your face and neck in a focused stream, funneled by the curve of the wall and the open trellis above. It lifts your hair, it carries the smell of limes, and it makes you exhale, long, slow, almost surprised, not because you were holding your breath, but because this breeze feels like something earned. Fringe tidbit. In some historic Persian gardens, the layout was subtly adjusted season by season, not just in plantings, but in wind strategy. Gardeners would reposition climbing vines, prune tree limbs selectively, and even shift low benches to align with the altered summer and winter wind patterns. Shade wasn't static. It was responsive, like a quiet choreography of leaves and air. You lean back on the bench, your head resting against the warm stone, and you listen. Not just for water now, but for the spaces between sound. The garden is teaching you a new kind of awareness, one that lives in hushes and half-light. The breeze lifts a few petals from a nearby vine and spins them lazily across your lap. You don't brush them off, they're part of the mood. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were designed primarily for aesthetic pleasure or spiritual alignment. Some point to their visual symmetry and poetic associations as proof of aesthetic intent. Others emphasize the metaphysical symbolism, the alignment with cardinal directions, the symbolic rivers, the mirroring of paradise. But here, in this shaded nook, the debate feels irrelevant. The garden is not choosing one or the other. It's simply being both without needing to explain itself. You rise again, moving toward the edge of the quadrant where a low parapet opens onto a stepped waterway. It's a cascade, not a dramatic waterfall, but a series of small shallow steps carved into stone, down which water dribbles softly, catching the light in slivers. This isn't noise, it's texture. You kneel beside it, running your fingers across the stones. They're worn smooth by centuries of water, tracing the same lines over and over, like calligraphy in liquid. You follow the cascade with your eyes, watching it disappear into a hedge of date palms. Beyond that lies another quadrant, sunlit again, and you know your journey will continue. But here, at this border of water and shade, you linger. It feels like the garden is giving you a moment to absorb before you move on. A light joke breezes through your thoughts. If you tried to replicate this cooling system in your apartment, you'd end up taping leaves to the air conditioner and calling it inspired. Zero effect, but aesthetics. You smile and then turn toward the date palms, their long fronds flickering in the light like upside-down fans. You pass beneath their reach and enter the next quadrant, where the air smells different, drier now, touched by sun-warmed stone and the faint citrus of fallen oranges. The light returns in golden patches, bouncing off polished tiles and bouncing again into pools hidden in low alcoves. You feel the shift not just in temperature, but in mood. And yet the wind still follows, softer now, not as insistent, like a friend who doesn't want to leave your side but knows when to be quiet. You pause in the center of the sunlit clearing and turn slowly in place, letting the garden circle you, quadrant by quadrant. Shade, wind, scent, stillness. This is what Persian gardeners mastered. Not the elimination of heat, but the negotiation of it. They didn't fight nature. They invited it in, gently redirected it, and asked it to behave politely. As you walk on, a breeze lifts again, just enough to make the cypress trees above sway in acknowledgement. And below them, the water flows on, steady as breath. You follow the stepped cascade until the trickle becomes a stream again, curving between garden beds like a silver thread stitched into the earth. The breeze has softened, slipping between pomegranate trees and pulling up the scent of earth still cool beneath a shallow layer of sun. You pass under another arch of vines, this time grape, their twisting arms trained over lattice in practiced knots, and the world narrows into a corridor of green and dappled gold. The grape leaves hum softly in the breeze, rustling with that paper-thin flutter that always sounds like they're gossiping quietly among themselves. And then you arrive in a new quadrant. Not larger, not louder, just different. Here, water isn't the background hum, it's the feature. 4 narrow channels converge on a broad circular basin at the center. The water enters without fanfare, flows along blue-glazed tilework, and exits again, always moving, always calm. No fountain spray, no splashing drama, just the gentle geometry of water flowing precisely as it was invited to. You approach the basin and crouch beside it. You can see your reflection in the still surface, but it's a soft version of you, distorted slightly by ripples and light, like a memory with edges worn down. Mainstream historical fact. Water was the most important design element in Persian gardens, not just for irrigation, but as a symbol of life, purification, and paradise. Flowing water was carefully directed into channels called jui and arranged to mirror the layout of the heavens. It cooled the air, provided drinking and bathing water, reflected light to brighten shady spots, and often marked the cardinal directions through its movement. Persian gardens were built around water. Without it, the rest would not exist. You walk slowly around the basin, noting how the light bounces upward onto the underbellies of nearby fig leaves, and how the breeze skims the water's surface in micro ripples, like an invisible finger trailing across the skin of a sleeping lake. The basin isn't deep, maybe ankle-high at most, but the effect is immense. It turns the surrounding space into a microclimate, cooler, softer, more alive, and above all, quiet. You sit at the edge, your back to a low stone pillar, and let your fingers trail in the water. It's colder than expected, as if drawn from the deep parts of the earth. You wonder how far it traveled underground before reaching this garden. You wonder who set the flow in motion centuries ago, digging channels with care, calculating slope and distance by instinct and experience, not laser levels. Fringe tidbit. Some Persian gardeners could estimate flow rates with astonishing precision just by observing how a leaf moved in water. They would float leaves on the surface and track their journey across a channel to detect blockages, slope inconsistencies, or leaks. It was water management as a form of meditation, and possibly the world's slowest extreme sport. Across the basin, a boy appears. He's no older than 12, dressed in loose cotton, barefoot, carrying a brass pitcher. He moves like someone trained by silence, placing each foot so softly the birds don't even flinch. He kneels beside the far channel, fills the pitcher without spilling a drop, and disappears behind a hedge with the same practiced grace. You're left with only the sound of the stream and the soft creak of fig branches above. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were meant to be public or private spaces. Some records describe royal gardens open to townspeople during festivals, while others suggest they were highly exclusive, used only by the elite or reserved for court ceremonies. The design itself supports both readings. Walled off from the world, but built with wide paths and gathering spaces. Maybe they were both. A performance of generosity and a retreat for solitude, much like water itself, public in source, private in touch. You rise again, the hem of your robe damp from the basin, and follow one of the exit channels deeper into the quadrant. It winds past raised garden beds, square, neatly bordered, and planted in symmetrical patterns like tapestries made of leaves. These aren't haphazard vegetables. This is horticulture as embroidery. Mint, lavender, thyme, basil. The smell intensifies as you brush past, each step releasing another pocket of scent, until the air becomes a layered perfume, green, sharp, slightly sweet. You reach down and pluck a single sprig of mint, crush it between your fingers and inhale. It cools your lungs. Somehow it even slows your thoughts. A light joke floats in. If grocery stores labeled herbs with the kind of poetry found here, you'd end up impulse buying basil of introspection and thyme for forgotten sorrows. Zero recipe success, but a deeply moving salad. The path narrows near a small outbuilding, half-storage shed, half-shaded niche, where a gardener tends a channel with a wooden rake. He isn't clearing debris. He's adjusting flow. With each pull of the rake, the water's path shifts slightly, filling one furrow more than another, redistributing coolness and irrigation without ever turning a tap. He doesn't look up. His rhythm is smooth and slow, the kind of movement you could measure a day by. You stand back, letting the scent of earth and damp wood settle around you. This quadrant isn't trying to impress you. It just works. Quietly, persistently, like time or breath or kindness. You walk along the edge one last time before crossing over to the next quadrant, your feet brushing tile warmed by filtered sun, and you realize you haven't checked the hour. You haven't needed to. The garden has been keeping time for you, with shadow, with breeze, with the pace of water sliding gently beside you. And somewhere behind you, the mint still breathes. You step over a low water channel, the smooth tiles slightly damp beneath your soles, and feel the garden ease you into another mood entirely. This new quadrant is brighter, intentionally so, but it doesn't glare. The sunlight here arrives like a guest that knows not to speak too loudly. The breeze has shifted again, now running lengthwise down a narrow path bordered by slender cypress trees that stand like quiet sentinels. Their long shadows stretch across the gravel in stripes, moving slowly with the arc of the day. The entire space feels tuned, like a stringed instrument humming in perfect resonance with air and angle. Here, the water isn't pooled. It flows. Thin, elegant streams run straight and shallow between raised beds, their paths so precisely cut that even the breeze seems to follow their lead. You walk beside one, and it guides you naturally forward, not just with motion, but with invitation. You're not being pushed, you're being gently persuaded. Mainstream historical fact. The Persian garden's central principle wasn't just lush planting, it was balance. Everything was measured. The pitch of the water channels, the spacing of trees, the rhythm of paths to pause and proceed. This created a naturally moderated climate, but also a deeply psychological one. Movement through the garden mimicked a spiritual journey, from exposure to shelter, dryness to mist, restlessness to calm. As you walk, you notice how the breeze catches differently here. That's not an accident. This part of the garden has been angled just slightly to catch the prevailing wind and channel it down narrow lanes between beds. And the plants themselves help. Tall stalks of sugarcane, stands of bamboo like reeds, and groves of slim-trunked mulberry trees all create natural corridors for the air to move through, speeding or slowing it with the care of someone setting a table with different-sized glasses, each vessel creating its own note. You pause near a row of date palms. Their fronds clack softly in the wind, and beyond them, a low wall bears a tiled inscription, faded but still readable. You trace it with your fingers, not deciphering the calligraphy, just following its motion. It feels like a blessing, or a schedule, or maybe both. Fringe tidbit. Some gardens included poetry panels inscribed with verses timed to seasonal changes. In spring, a stanza about jasmine. In summer, an ode to figs. These weren't labeled with months or dates. They appeared at specific points in the garden, and the blooming around them made the calendar visible through color and scent. Imagine replacing your phone's calendar app with a blooming almond tree. You keep walking and the garden gently narrows again. The walls here are taller, casting a long afternoon shadow across a lane of lavender. The plants buzz with lazy bees, none in a rush, their wings creating a low drone like a lullaby for flowers. A low bench waits beneath a trellis of white climbing roses, half in shadow, half in light. You sit on the shady side. The breeze funnels in gently, curving around the lavender bed before brushing past your shoulders. Even the sound of it seems changed. Sharper here, more defined, like someone whispering only part of a sentence. You realize the walls are acting like an acoustic chamber, catching and bouncing the wind in loops. You feel it before you understand it. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were constructed with formal knowledge of acoustics, or if the sonic beauty of these spaces was a happy accident. Some argue that specific plantings and wall heights created sound corridors, amplifying whispers and enhancing bird calls. Others suggest the effect was incidental but adopted into later design theory. Still, standing here, with the wind brushing through reeds and the lavender buzzing at your feet, it's hard to call it anything but intentional. You lie back slightly, letting your head rest against the curved wall of the bench. Above you, the white roses sway. One petal loosens and falls, spiraling slowly toward your lap before catching on the cuff of your sleeve. You leave it there. It looks like it belongs. A light joke forms, as gentle as the garden itself. If you ever built a wind-tuned garden in your apartment, you'd probably tape a fan to a coat rack and hang basil from it. Zero effect, but full points for vibe. Still, you think about it longer than you should. From your seat, you notice another detail. Along the far wall, built into the brick just above shoulder height, are openings, not windows exactly, more like narrow slits. And from these slits, a cool wind flows. You stand and walk toward one, holding your hand up to the gap. The breeze is stronger here and steady. This is no random draft. This is a badger or wind tower, a passive cooling system perfected in Persian architecture long before electricity. The tower itself isn't visible from here, hidden on the outer face of the garden wall. But inside, its effects are everywhere. The breeze it pulls in is guided downward through a vertical shaft and then dispersed horizontally through vents like this one. It's not blowing wildly. It's breathing, exhaling a measured stream of comfort into the hottest hours of the day. You move along the wall, passing vent after vent, until the path opens again into a wide patio. This space is more formal, laid in stone, lined with columns, open to the sky except for a fringe of grapevines that curl around the rooftop's edge. At the center of the patio sits another pool, this one smaller but deeper, and surrounded by wide, flat seating stones that stay cool in the shade. You step onto one and sit. The breeze is stronger here. The tower breathes louder, but still not loud, never loud. And always, the water flows. The wind tower continues its slow exhale, cooling your face as if the garden itself were sighing in contentment. You sit at the edge of the deeper pool, your fingertips tracing the water's surface, feeling where breeze and liquid meet in tiny shifting currents. The sun is high now, but you wouldn't know it. Here, in this corner of clever stonework and open sky, the heat has been muted, softened by centuries of thoughtful design. You could fall asleep with your feet in the water and never overheat, not from negligence, but from perfect planning. Around the pool, the garden's shape tightens into low alcoves and tucked-away recesses. You step toward one, an arched nook with a single marble bench and a tiled floor that glows faintly in the light, pale blue and sea glass green. The air inside smells of lime blossoms and old plaster. You sit, and your back finds the cool curve of the wall as easily as if it were shaped for you. Above, a pattern of lattice throws shadows onto the floor that shifts slowly with the passing day, like a sundial made of lace. This is what the Persians understood so intimately, that shade isn't the absence of light, it's the conversation between light and surface. Every leaf, every branch, every wall here was planned not just for where it stands, but for where its shadow will fall. You glance up through the lattice, watching sunlight ripple like water through vines. It's beautiful. But more than that, it's functional. These filtered beams reduce solar heat while preserving airflow, creating a soft gradient between sun and shadow that doesn't shock the body but gently cools it by degrees. Mainstream historical fact. Persian garden design often used pergolas, screens, and grills not only as decorative elements, but as practical tools for solar modulation. Sunlight wasn't eliminated, it was sculpted. Intricate brickwork, geometric woodwork, and foliage layers allowed sunlight to enter spaces in measured, intentional ways, reducing temperature while creating visual complexity. In effect, they shaded the eye as much as the skin. You stand and move toward a smaller channel just beyond the alcove, one that disappears beneath a raised planting bed before emerging again further on. The water is silent here, not still, but silent, hidden under stone and root. You trail it for a few steps and find another shaded basin, this one barely the size of a large bowl, tucked beneath a pomegranate tree. The tree is old, twisted, heavy-barked, its branches low and wide. The basin sits directly under it, a mirror to its fruit and leaves. You crouch and splash your hands in the basin. It's cooler than the others. More surprising, you sit beside it on a small brick ledge, the kind worn smooth by generations of resting backs. The scent of the tree is faintly bitter, faintly floral, and the occasional drop of dew or overripe fruit plinks into the water with a lazy splash that startles a lizard into stillness. Fringe tidbit: some Persian gardens included tiny shade wells, sunken bowls or carved hollows that collected condensation during cooler nights. In arid climates, these functioned almost like micro-air conditioners, releasing faint coolness during the hottest parts of the day. Gardeners would sometimes drop a stone into them just to listen to the echo, reminding themselves that even silence had texture. A soft wind threads through the pomegranate branches, and the fruit above sway with the rhythm of someone nodding in slow agreement. You sit a while longer, your shoulder against the tree's warm trunk, and notice how different this shade feels. Dappled, moving, alive. Not the flat coolness of concrete, but a woven shade, filtered by green and gold, shifting with every breeze. The longer you stay, the more it feels like a cloak the garden has draped over you. Historians still argue whether these spaces were designed solely for rest or for ritual as well. Some believe that shaded corners like this were informal prayer spots, chosen for their sensory quietude. Others argue they were simply comfort zones, shaded lounges for poetry, conversation, or quiet meals. But again, the line blurs. In gardens like these, stillness was ritual, quietude was a form of practice, and the breeze itself might have been enough to count as prayer. You rise slowly, brushing soil from your hands, and step back onto the main path. As you walk, the garden's structure begins to feel more like choreography than construction. The alternating corridors of sun and shade mimic the tempo of breath. Inhale in warmth, exhale into coolness. Your feet know when to slow down. Your shoulders know when to relax. The garden has taught your body its own rhythm. You turn a corner and enter a corridor lined with tall, whitewashed walls. The surfaces glow, but not from heat. The pale plaster reflects light instead of absorbing it, bouncing brightness back into the space without adding warmth. You reach out and feel the wall. It's cool, smooth. The plaster has a faint texture, like pressed chalk, and you spot flecks of crushed seashell and straw within the mix. This isn't decoration, it's climate technology. A small square window up high lets in a shaft of sunlight that lands perfectly on a shallow tile basin below. Water drips from a copper spout into the basin at slow, steady intervals. Plink, plink, plink. The sound is hypnotic. You lean in closer. A light joke stirs. If you had a dripping basin in your apartment, you'd call the landlord. Unless, of course, it was calibrated to lower your stress like this one. In that case, you'd cancel your Spotify subscription and rename your kitchen the Quiet Room. You stay with the dripping water a little longer. The timing is deliberate, not random. The spout is angled precisely, likely fed by a slow channel from one of the higher pools. The drops land in a spiral-shaped basin that helps amplify the sound. You close your eyes and it becomes a heartbeat, not yours, the garden's. And all around you, the wind moves softly, always softly. You drift from the whitewashed corridor like a cloud sliding over sun-warmed stone, and the breeze ushers you gently into another fold of the garden's quiet language. This quadrant feels older, not in ruin, but in rhythm. The paths here don't aim to impress. They meander. The gravel underfoot is looser, the beds wider, the shade deeper, more patient. There are fewer flowers, but the air is thicker, with history, with scent, with something that feels like the memory of peace. A soft slope leads you downward, just a few gentle steps, and you find yourself entering a small glade hemmed in by low cypress and taller fig. At the center sits a pool, not wide, but long, lined in dark stone that drinks in the light and reflects the sky with uncanny clarity. You walk the edge slowly, watching the mirrored branches above sway across the surface. A breeze moves through the glade and touches the pool, sending a ripple that distorts the reflection just enough to remind you, this isn't a painting, this is alive. This is the garden's pre-dawn memory, a place where light rarely reaches in full and time slips sideways. Mainstream historical fact: Persian gardens were often designed with morning rituals in mind. Before sunrise, the garden served not only as a cooling refuge, but as a space for spiritual centering. Monks, philosophers, and early risers would walk through quiet paths where the temperature was lowest, the dew freshest, and the wind most forgiving. These moments were considered sacred, not dramatic sunrise spectacles, but soft, interior beginnings. You sit at the edge of the long, narrow pool and lean close. The water's surface is completely still again. Not frozen, just attentive. You whisper something, not to be heard but to feel how your breath moves across the mirrored skin of the pool. Even that small disruption feels noticed. In this quadrant, sound carries differently. The cypress seems to muffle, while the fig releases its own softness into the air, a sweetness with an edge of earth. A small platform juts out beside the pool, only a few inches above the waterline. You step onto it and sit, legs folded, hands resting lightly on your knees. There's no performance here, just presence. The breeze nudges a few leaves loose from the branches above. They drift down and land silently on the surface. One floats toward you. You don't brush it away. Fringe tidbit. In some Persian philosophical texts, early morning garden walks were described as the soft discipline of air, a practice meant to cultivate attentiveness. Some scholars were known to walk barefoot through wet grass, not for discomfort, but to stay grounded. The water was cold, the air was sharp, but clarity often followed. You lie back against the platform, letting your head rest on folded arms. The stone is cool from the night and smells faintly mineral. You can hear birds now, just one or two, not singing exactly but murmuring, as if the world is deciding whether it's time to wake up. You could stay here forever, or at least until your stomach remembers it skipped breakfast. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were used more at night or in the early hours. The lack of artificial lighting and the emphasis on moon paths and wind towers suggest that twilight and dawn were prized hours. Yet many records speak of mid-morning poetry readings and afternoon meals taken in dappled courtyards. The truth is likely less binary. Gardens were used like musical instruments, different tones for different moods. Some chords were meant for sleep, others for awakening. You sit up again, slowly, like surfacing from a warm bath. A side path leads you away from the water, beneath a series of wooden beams draped in vines. This area has no formal quadrant. It's an in-between, a corridor of transition. You pass beneath trailing tendrils of wisteria, their purple bells gently brushing your shoulders, and feel the breeze again, cooler now, scented with something faintly citrusy. You round a corner and find yourself standing before a small stone basin, barely more than a hollow in a sunken platform. Water drips into it from a height, once every few seconds. The sound is sharp, not loud. Crisp, a plink that echoes slightly against the nearby walls. You kneel beside it and see that the water level is marked by a floating flower. Not decorative, functional. The rise of the water will slowly shift the bloom toward a carved line. When the petals reach that line, the hour has passed. This is a clepsydra, a water clock. A light joke surfaces. If you swapped your phone alarm for this system, you'd miss every meeting but gain an improved relationship with flowers and peace. Zero hustle, maximum grace. You sit and watch the drip. Each drop enters the bowl and sends a small ripple outward. The floating flower wobbles gently and then settles. Another drop. Another ripple, time not measured with ticks but with weight, with arrival. You realize the air around you has changed again. The walls here are narrower, the path more enclosed. The wind moves in short bursts now, like exhalations. The garden has closed its mouth a bit, less public, more internal. You follow a winding lane past another basin, this one dry, and come to a circular bench built around an ancient olive tree. You sit on the curved stone, your hand resting on the tree's warm bark. Its leaves shimmer in the filtered light, small and gray-green, as unhurried as the rest of this place. You lean back, your shoulders touching warm plaster, and let your head tilt toward the sky. And through the olive leaves, the wind moves on. You linger a while under the olive tree, tracing one knot in the bark with the tip of your finger, letting the grain of centuries pass beneath your touch. The wind curls through the leaves like a second voice, older than language but always fluent in silence. You look up again, and for a moment, the shifting light above feels like it's breathing with you. Dappled sunlight stretching, pausing, then slipping back into stillness. There's no rush here. The garden unfolds like a story with no final chapter. You rise and wander back toward the garden's central axis, the main channel gently guiding you like a river returning to its source. The deeper pool you passed earlier now gleams with midday brightness, its edges lit like a framed mirror, every ripple edged in silver. And yet the air remains cool. You notice the subtle slope of the pathways again, how they lean inward just slightly, drawing water and breeze toward the heart of the garden. This isn't just a beautiful place, it's an engine built on stillness. Near the water's edge, you spot something new. a shallow stone trench crossing perpendicular to the main channel. You crouch and follow it visually. It runs from the edge of the garden all the way to a modest doorway built into one of the walls. Behind that door lies one of the great secrets of Persian engineering, the qanat. Mainstream historical fact: qanats were underground aqueduct systems developed in ancient Persia to transport water from distant mountains or aquifers into cities and gardens. Using gravity alone, they channeled cool, fresh water across long distances without exposure to evaporation or sunlight. Persian gardeners used qanats not just to irrigate, but to cool air, feed pools, and even power small fountains, all without a single pump or gear. You approach the doorway and press a hand to the stone frame. It's cooler here. Not chilled like ice, but firm and full of shade, like the touch of marble at dusk. You don't open the door, you're not here to intrude. But just being near it, feeling the cool draft that leaks through the base, gives you a sense of what lies below. A whisper of the hidden river. Fringe tidbit: some garden caretakers believed qanats had their own moods. When the air at the outlet turned sharply cold, it was said the mountain source had shifted, or that spirits within the earth were stirring. Whether myth or meteorology, these underground channels were treated with reverence, part plumbing, part prayer. You leave the qanat gate behind and stroll back toward the courtyard, this time noticing how the plants seem arranged not just for form, but for function. A tall palm is flanked by shorter citrus trees, whose branches shield the soil at the palm's roots from heat. Beneath the citrus, a bed of basil and chives soaks up the moisture and dappled sun. It's a vertical ecosystem, layered like a cake made of air and leaf. Nothing grows here alone. You sit again near the central basin, the one lined with turquoise tile. From this vantage, you can see all four quadrants, the formal symmetry now a gentle map rather than a diagram. Each section offers a different sensation: brightness, breeze, scent, shadow. You've walked through them all, and the garden has never raised its voice. Historians still argue whether the Persian garden was a place of strict order or of natural improvisation. The symmetry suggests control, but the plantings often defied perfect repetition. Some scholars say the layout was a canvas for seasonal spontaneity. Others insist the design encoded layers of cultural hierarchy. But perhaps it was neither, and both. Maybe the garden's true genius was in giving order and nature a shared vocabulary, a peace treaty written in vines and water. You rest your arms on your knees and watch the water catch the sky again. A dove dips low, drinks at the edge, and takes off without sound. You stand and move toward the vine-draped pergola where you first began the day. The vines have shifted since then, their shadows stretching in new directions, creating different lace patterns on the stone floor. You stand in one of them, let the shadow cover your hands, and feel the same warmth from the sun, just filtered, softened, tempered. A breeze arrives from behind, loops once around your ankles, then up your back, catching the hem of your robe and lifting it slightly. It continues forward, toward the pergola's columns, where it meets a sheet of still water and scatters it briefly. Light glints from the disturbed surface, then stillness again. A light joke curls at the edge of your mind. If Persian garden engineering had a slogan, it'd be cooler than your AC, quieter than your playlist, and absolutely no batteries required. You walk once more through the cypress corridor, the gravel crunching faintly underfoot, your pace in rhythm with the branches above. They sway gently, their scent rising and falling with the motion. You turn one last corner and find yourself back at the fig tree, its broad leaves casting deep shadows. The pool beneath it, still half full, glistens as if it too has been waiting for you. You crouch beside it and touch the water. It's cooler now than when you first arrived, or maybe you're just more attuned to the shift. The garden has taught you to notice, to feel before understanding, to cool without chilling. You close your eyes and listen, not for birds or footsteps, not even for wind, but for the water. It is always there, always moving, quiet but never still. And you move with it. You leave the fig tree's pool behind like a bookmark placed softly in the margin of a favorite chapter, knowing you'll return, though maybe not needing to. The garden pulls you gently onward, not with urgency, but with that same low murmur that has carried you through each space so far. Water, wind, and the soft logic of design so seamless it feels like instinct. You follow a new path, narrower than the others, flanked on both sides by low shrubs that brush your calves as you walk. Lavender, thyme, maybe a hint of wild basil. The scent lifts with every step, stirred like a quiet memory in motion. This corridor leads you into another open court, this one more exposed. Sunlight pools across a wide stone surface where no trees grow, at least not close by, but you quickly notice that this isn't neglect. It's calibration. The open space is deliberate, and at its heart lies a trick of shade and science. A long, flat channel of water no more than an inch deep, running perfectly level from one end of the court to the other. At first, it seems like a mirror. Then you realize it's also a clock. Mainstream historical fact. In some advanced Persian gardens and palaces, shallow reflecting pools were used to track time during the day. These water features were placed with such precision that the sun's reflection would travel across the surface at a consistent pace, allowing caretakers or guests to mark the passing hours. Combined with carefully aligned trees or walls, they functioned as both aesthetic features and sundials made of silence and shimmer. You kneel beside the water and watch the reflected sky. A cloud passes slowly, just one, and its shadow glides across the surface, distorting for a moment, then smoothing again. The water is completely still, untroubled by fountains or fish. Its purpose is clarity, and that clarity has a role to let light speak. You stand and walk slowly down the length of the channel, noticing how the reflection travels with you. Time here is both a line and a circle. The pool reminds you that while clocks tick forward, the sun loops back, and somewhere between those two ideas lies something peaceful, not urgency, just movement. A breeze slips in across the open court, unblocked by foliage, and the air temperature rises a few degrees, but not unpleasantly. The sun hits your shoulders fully now, and yet the heat doesn't bite. Why? Because just beyond the edges of this open space, a series of architectural flourishes catch your attention, small, low walls lined with shadar. You walk toward one and realize it's not just a barrier. It's a surface, a polished, slightly concave platform over which water trickles continuously in a sheet so thin it's barely visible unless the light hits it just right. You crouch and touch the surface. Cool. The water skims across the top in a slow glide, no splashing, no drama, just a whisper of motion. It evaporates slowly in the sunlight, and the air immediately above it cools as a result. It's like standing next to breath that remembers mountain snow. Fringe tidbit. The shadar, meaning veil in Persian, was an ingenious feature in many elite gardens. These gently sloped marble or stone plains created a thin film of moving water, designed not for irrigation but for temperature control and ambience. In some cases, the water was mixed with fragrant infusions, rose, mint, or orange blossom, turning every breeze into scented relief. Essentially, it was the ancient world's version of luxury spa misting. You stand again and let the wind catch your sleeve. It lifts slightly, then falls, echoing the ripple that moves slowly across the shadar. The breeze here feels theatrical, like it knows it's part of the show. You walk to another shadar, this one slightly curved, and discover a small depression in the middle. You press your palm into it and feel the smoothness of centuries. The water glides around your hand, not over it. The design is that precise. Historians still argue whether these features were inspired by ritual cleansing traditions, aesthetic aspirations, or a more practical need to manipulate heat in outdoor courtyards. Some believe the shadar originated from Zoroastrian fire temples where purity of air and water was sacred. Others see it as a royal indulgence, evidence of immense wealth translated into elegant climate control. But either way, it worked, and more importantly, it endures. You find a shaded alcove just beyond the open court, a slight overhang with 3 low arches framing a view of the pool and sky. You sit on a smooth stone bench, cooled by shadow, and feel the temperature drop again. Just a few degrees, just enough to relax your shoulders, slow your heart, make you forget whatever it was you thought you had to remember. A light joke surfaces lazily in your thoughts. If modern offices replaced their AC units with shadar-fed courtyards, productivity might plummet, but employee napping would reach transcendental levels, enlightenment via mist. You look back out across the court. The water still flows, the reflections still glide. And though you've sat here only minutes, you can tell that time has moved. Not because you feel older, but because the light has shifted, like a bookmark slid one paragraph forward. You rise once more, crossing the court in a slow arc. Your shadow curves with you, soft-edged and dark against the pale stone. The shadar hums faintly behind you, a constant patient presence. You step through another vine-covered arch and leave the courtyard behind, not with regret, but with gratitude. You didn't measure time there, you let it measure you. And ahead, the garden waits with its next slow lesson, written in wind and flowing softly underfoot. You step from the brightness of the courtyard into a shaded walkway, and it feels like a whispered exhale against your skin. The shadar's low murmurs fade behind you, replaced by the faint brush of wind threading through climbing vines overhead. You find yourself walking through a pergola wrapped in jasmine, its sweet perfume hanging in the cool air like something intentional, like someone designed a lullaby you could breathe. The space is narrower now, more intimate. The path curves gently, flanked on both sides by shoulder-height garden beds filled with herbs and flowering shrubs. The breeze moves slower here, coaxed through the channel like a story being told with pauses. A white cat naps in a beam of sunlight between 2 olive pots. It opens one eye as you pass, decides you're not worth the effort, and closes it again. You reach a stone platform tucked just behind a cluster of apricot trees, their branches bowed under the weight of ripening fruit. Here, the water isn't flowing, it's trickling. A narrow fountain, barely taller than your knee, murmurs into a bowl-shaped basin, its voice quiet and steady, like someone practicing patience out loud. Mainstream historical fact. Unlike the grand fountains of Roman or French tradition, Persian garden fountains were intentionally restrained. They didn't shoot water into the air, they whispered it into pools, relying on gravity, slope, and acoustics. Their goal wasn't spectacle, it was calm. The design mirrored cultural values of modesty and reflection, often aligning with Sufi or philosophical beliefs about listening and stillness. You sit on the low edge of the platform, close enough to the fountain to feel its rhythm. The trickle doesn't demand attention, but once you tune in, it becomes impossible to ignore. You notice the pattern: 2 slow drops, then a third slightly faster, then stillness. Then it begins again. You lean forward and see that the fountain's lip has been notched, slightly uneven, shaping the water's descent into a rhythm rather than a stream. This isn't a flaw, it's intended irregularity. Fringe tidbit. In some Persian texts, uneven fountains were celebrated for their resemblance to human breath. Uneven, personal, alive. The irregularity was thought to help meditation, reminding listeners that nature never moves in straight lines or perfect time signatures. Some scholars even speculated that the fountains helped guide the breathing rhythms of early Sufi meditators. You close your eyes and the trickle starts to map itself onto your breathing. Inhale, drip, drip, exhale, pause, another drip. It's not music, it's something quieter than that, a rhythm too soft to hum but too steady to forget. And somewhere above you, the apricot branches stir gently, their fruit catching the filtered light like warm little suns. Historians still argue whether the fountains were ever meant to mark time or simply accompany it. Some archaeologists believe they may have been calibrated to measure hourly intervals by the rise and fall of bowl levels, much like clepsydras. Others insist they were strictly ambient, designed to occupy silence without interrupting it. Regardless of their intent, the result remains the same. They soothe, they anchor, and in the quiet they remind you that not every second must be counted. You rise slowly and walk the length of the pergola again, the vines brushing your shoulders, the shadows dappled and shifting beneath your feet. A soft wind greets you on the other side, warmer now but gentle. It carries the scent of thyme, apricot, and a hint of old stone warmed by sunlight. You follow it toward a new corner of the garden where low benches curve around a second, smaller pool. This one is shallow and square, only a few inches deep, with stepped sides that catch the light like folded paper. The water doesn't move much, just enough to shimmer. You sit on one of the benches and look down. The pool reflects the sky again, now slightly more golden. You don't need a watch to know the hour. The light has thickened, deepened, mellowed. You've entered late afternoon. A pair of doves land nearby, pecking at something in the gravel. They don't startle. You're part of the furniture now. Another still, quiet thing in a garden full of them. A light joke surfaces. If you installed one of these tiny fountains in your bedroom, you'd sleep better, but your plumbing bill might read like poetry. 100 whispers, 24 sighs, and a gentle burble. Pay now or drift off forever. You stay on the bench longer than you mean to. The air is so even, so temperate, you barely notice how perfectly your body feels at rest. No goosebumps, no sweat, just balance. You realize that everything around you has been tuned, not just shaded and scented, but tempered, like steel passed through fire and cooled in still water. This quadrant has no grand sculptures, no drama, just proportion, the kind of grace that doesn't announce itself until you feel it in your bones. It reminds you that stillness, when built with care, isn't emptiness, it's invitation. And even as the light begins to slant longer across the tiles, even as a single bell in the distance marks some hour you don't need to name, the fountain goes on. Trickle. Pause. Trickle. And always, beneath everything, the garden breathes. You rise from the bench with that dreamy hesitation that happens only when the air is just right and your limbs have forgotten how to carry urgency. The square pool behind you glows faintly in the shifting light, and the fountain's last drip echoes once, then holds its breath. You smile at that, like the garden has decided it's done saying things for a while. Fair enough. You've heard enough to last an afternoon. You follow a curved path now, soft gravel underfoot, your sandals tracing a crescent through golden dust. This is the garden's quieter edge. If the rest of it was a whisper, this is the part where the whisper turns into reflection. No birds here, no breeze strong enough to lift a leaf, just stillness, but not the cold, heavy kind. This is the kind of stillness that rests on your shoulders like a light shawl. You feel it in your chest space, uncluttered and kind. At the bend in the path, a pavilion rises. Modest, low-roofed, open on all sides, it doesn't dominate the garden. It joins it. Built from cedar, stone, and cool plaster, it sits lightly on the ground, as if it arrived here without disturbing a single root. You step up 2 shallow stairs and enter the shaded interior. Pillars support the overhanging roof, their bases decorated with simple tile mosaics, nothing ornate, just rhythm. Like everything else in the garden, it's elegant without trying too hard. Inside, the air is several degrees cooler. Not because of magic, but because of shade and space and airflow designed by people who thought deeply about where wind likes to go. You sit on a low platform, cushioned with a simple woven mat, and look outward through one of the wide archways. The entire quadrant stretches before you like a tapestry. Cypress, citrus, water, stone, all framed just right, like a poem where the line breaks fall in exactly the right places. Mainstream historical fact. Persian pavilions, or kiosks, were architectural centerpieces in garden design, not just for aesthetics, but for function. They were carefully positioned to intercept breezes, often placed at the crossing point of garden axes or beside major water features. Built open to the air and aligned with prevailing winds, they served as natural cooling chambers, rest areas, and places for reading, meditation, or hosting poetry gatherings. These weren't showpieces. They were breathable rooms. You recline slightly, letting your weight shift into the mat, and feel the air move across your face in long, slow intervals, like someone sighing rhythmically nearby. From here, you can hear 2 separate water sources, one a bubbling channel somewhere behind the wall, and the other a distant splash, maybe a fountain you've yet to see. Together, they make a kind of music, no melody, no chorus, just presence. Fringe tidbit. In royal gardens, pavilion columns were sometimes spaced to match metrical rhythms from classical Persian poetry. So when someone stood inside and recited verses aloud, the spaces between lines echoed physically, creating a kind of architectural poetry. The building itself became part of the performance, an instrument made of silence and stone. You rest your hand on the floor beside you. The stone is warm where the sun reaches, cool where the shadow holds it. You trace the border between the 2 temperatures with your fingertips and feel the gentle shift, like seasons moving across an inch of tile. You imagine sleeping here, not for escape, but as an offering to the air, just letting the hours pass as the light wanders from one pillar to the next. Historians still argue whether pavilions were primarily for aristocratic leisure or for sacred retreat. Some describe them as luxurious hideaways for reading, eating, and lounging. Others interpret them as extensions of prayer halls, secular in form, spiritual in experience, but in practice, the two aren't mutually exclusive. The line between indulgence and reflection here is soft, like the line between sun and shade, and really, what is leisure if not a kind of reverence? You lean back, head resting against a cedar pillar, and close your eyes. A breeze enters from the north side, travels across your chest, and exits behind you with perfect grace. Not a draft, never a draft, just flow. The pavilion doesn't trap air. It welcomes it, hosts it, and lets it move on when it's ready. You think, not for the first time, that your apartment could learn a thing or two about hosting the wind. A light joke finds you. If modern living rooms had this kind of cross-ventilation, you'd spend more time napping and less time adjusting your ceiling fan. 0 noise, maximum nap rating. You sit a little longer, watching shadows slide across the floor in slow lines. The light through the grapevine eaves above flickers gently, and for a moment you feel like you're watching time from the inside. There's no clock here, just the proof of motion written in shadow and softened air. You rise, eventually, not because you're in a hurry, but because the garden seems to nudge you onward. You step back into the sun, but you're not startled by it now. Your body's adjusted. The transition is kind, buffered by breeze and broken light. You follow a quiet gravel path lined with stone lanterns, their bases covered in moss. At the edge of the quadrant, just before the wall curves again, you spot a narrow channel of water making a U-turn. It slides along the base of the pavilion, vanishes behind a stone outcrop, then re-emerges beside a planter of white lilies. You walk beside it, matching its curve. You don't know where it leads, you don't need to. Because the wind follows. And the water flows. The curved channel leads you out from the shadow of the pavilion and into a sun-dappled corridor lined with soft grass underfoot, and the lazy hush of wind brushing low against the hedges. The garden opens into yet another pocket of calm, one that feels both open and enclosed. Like a pause between thoughts, a courtyard built for daydreams and for tending quiet work. This is the gardener's corner, though you'd hardly know it from how seamlessly it blends into the rest of the garden's harmony. You spot him now, An older man kneeling beside a tile trough, adjusting a reed-thin spout that feeds one of the water channels. He doesn't notice you at first, or maybe he does and simply doesn't mind your presence. His hands move slowly, carefully, never wasting a motion, as though he's conducting a ceremony only he understands. The spout bends slightly beneath his fingers, and the trickle shifts with a soft gurgle that evens out into a steady glide. He nods to himself, content. Only then does he glance your way and offer the kind of smile that says, "I see you, but we're in no hurry to speak." You don't disturb him, you just watch. His robe is dusted with pollen and crushed lavender, his sleeves rolled neatly and the soles of his feet coated in fine grit that speaks of long barefoot mornings. You wonder how many generations have come before him, how many hands have shaped this garden not with blueprints or tools but with intuition. Mainstream historical fact. Gardeners in historical Persian estates were not just laborers, they were revered as keepers of balance. Their work required expertise in hydrology, plant medicine, solar orientation, and even poetic tradition. A master gardener was as much an engineer as a philosopher, expected to anticipate seasonal shifts, adjust water flow by hand, and maintain harmony between human comfort and natural rhythm. These gardens were not maintained passively, they were tuned like instruments. You crouch near a long, narrow planting bed where mint grows thick along the path. Each footstep releases scent. You brush your fingers along the leaves and feel how cool they are, how deliberate the spacing is between each cluster. Farther down the path, pomegranate trees lean toward one another, their trunks trained with rope and time into gentle arches. The gardener walks past them and touches each one lightly as he goes, as if greeting old friends. Fringe tidbit. In some Persian gardens, senior gardeners were known to train trees to lean at specific angles to shape wind movement, either funneling it into certain corners or breaking it into smaller breezes for delicate beds. The term water whisperer wasn't poetic license, it reflected a real skill set, a kind of ecological fluency. Some gardeners were said to recognize different sections of a canal by the sound of water flowing through it alone. You wander past the gardener and into another small square, where 4 channels meet in a quiet cross, each one just wide enough for a sandal to dip into. You step across them carefully and find a sunken seating platform at the center, ringed with cooling stones and low curved benches. The air here is different again, not just cooler, but suspended, like the space holds its breath a little longer. You sit and feel the texture of the moment, sunlight broken into threads, breeze arriving at a diagonal, and the distant steady flow of water like a lullaby from 2 gardens over. You stretch your legs along the bench and let your head tilt back. Above you, vine-draped lattice filters the sky into moving fragments. A cloud drifts past, a shadow lengthens, the day bends slightly toward evening. Historians still argue whether the presence of gardeners in these elite estates was primarily functional or symbolic. Some say they were silent stewards of continuity, ensuring the garden mirrored cosmological order. Others argue they were semi-invisible, their labor deliberately softened so the garden would feel spontaneous. But when you watch someone adjust a vine so it dapples a wall just a little more softly, or redirect a stream to quiet a restless pool, it becomes clear. The gardener wasn't behind the curtain, he was the curtain. A light joke forms as the breeze lifts again. If your apartment's thermostat had the instincts of a Persian gardener, you'd never argue about room temperature again. Just get a vine, a clay pipe, and someone who hums in tune with the wind. You lean over the edge of the seating platform and trail your fingers in one of the 4 converging channels. The current moves faster here, barely noticeable unless you really feel for it. You imagine how carefully this moment was engineered. The slope of the channel, the placement of the bench, the height of the surrounding walls. It's not just water that flows here, comfort does, and it knows exactly where it's going. Somewhere behind you, the gardener speaks softly, not to you, but to a young apprentice who's just entered the square. They discuss a root, a leaf, the direction of a breeze. It's not instruction so much as shared noticing. You don't catch every word, but the cadence is gentle, like a mantra, and you find yourself sinking further into stillness just by being near it. You lie back fully now, the stone platform warm beneath you, the air above you threaded with light and vines. The channel gurgles softly at your feet. The apprentice laughs once, and it echoes like a ripple across the wall, then silence again. And somewhere, the wind shifts, and the water flows. You stay there longer than you meant to, stretched along the warm stone, eyes half closed, fingers skimming the surface of the channel. The apprentice and gardener have gone, their footsteps absorbed by the hush of gravel and vine. You rise eventually, slowly, and the garden doesn't mind. It holds the space as if you never left, as if you're always partly here, even when your body moves on. The path ahead curves gently left, shadowed by a stand of cedar trees whose scent rises thick and resinous with each warm breath of air. You follow it, your steps quiet now, as though the garden has trained you not just in silence, but in pace. There's a shift in the air, slight but certain. Cooler, not because of time, but because of texture. The stone underfoot gives way to packed earth. The trees draw in tighter, the light dapples deeper. This is where the fountains fall nearly silent. Not dry, just hushed. The water here flows underground for a stretch, then re-emerges in one of the garden's most subtle features, a whispering wall. You approach it from an angle, first noticing the gentle curve, then the sound, barely audible, like breath moving across reeds. Mainstream historical fact: Persian gardens occasionally included curved or concave walls near water features, designed not for decoration but acoustics. These walls captured ambient sounds, dripping water, soft footsteps, whispered conversation, and amplified them subtly across short distances. The intention wasn't to fill the garden with noise, but to sharpen the experience of listening. These walls taught you how to hear with care. You sit near the wall now, not quite leaning, but close enough to feel the way sound hangs differently in this crescent of stone. A tiny stream trickles out from a pipe shaped like a lion's mouth, the water curling down into a half-moon basin. There's no splash, just that thin, perpetual note of movement. It hums against the stone like a voice trying not to wake anyone. You place your hand near the stream and feel the draft. Yes, draft. The gentle breeze of water moving against air. And you realize that even here, even in what seems like a minor corner, the garden is measuring itself, tuning its channels, adjusting its temperature with quiet tools. Fringe tidbit. In some Persian architectural treatises, these whispering zones were considered ideal for early evening gatherings, not for parties, but for shared readings, philosophical debates, and prayer. The acoustics meant you could speak softly and be heard clearly. Some pavilions had these whisper walls built directly into their foundations, allowing a reader's voice to be carried gently across a courtyard. You whisper a word, not important what, and hear it echo faintly back, carried by the shape of the space. It feels more like a sigh than a sound, not meant for distance, just for reflection. You smile and stand again, brushing soil from your fingertips. A few dry rose petals cling to the folds of your sleeve. You walk along the wall, tracing its soft curve until it opens back into a wide path bordered by rectangular beds of ground cover herbs. Thyme, chamomile, saffron, crocus. Some in bloom, others already asleep beneath their leaves. The breeze shifts again, drawn through the corridor by the subtle draft created between this curve and the opposite wall. Your breath deepens without effort. Historians still argue whether these acoustic features were designed consciously or emerged through trial and error. Some claim they resulted from mathematical harmonics, builders knowing instinctively how curves shape sound. Others believe they were the product of accidental discovery, refined by generations of listeners. Either way, you're standing in proof. Someone, long ago, noticed what happened when sound touched stone, and they made it part of the garden's grammar. A light joke floats in with the wind. If your apartment walls had this kind of acoustics, you'd finally hear your own thoughts, though you'd still pretend to blame the neighbors when they got too deep. You come upon a low stone bench just beside the path. It's dappled in shadow, placed beneath a lime tree whose branches bend in a near-perfect arc over the water channel beside it. You sit. The lime leaves shimmer in the breeze, and a few tiny blossoms spiral down, twirling like slow snow. One lands on your knee. You leave it there. You notice a change in the light. Not drastic, just warmer. The gold deepens, tilting slightly toward amber. You realize the garden is now preparing for evening, and it's doing so without spectacle. Just slow shifts, soft light, cooler stones, and a few more petals in the air. You walk again, slower than before. The whisper wall behind you fades into the cypress shadows. Ahead, a wide rectangular basin stretches toward a set of stone steps, the surface of the water barely rippled. You don't approach yet. Instead, you pause beside a narrow bed of myrtle and bend down, brushing your fingers across the leaves. The scent is green, sharp, clean, a kind of astringent peace. You realize that the garden hasn't changed so much as you have. You've started walking with its rhythm, breathing its tempo. You feel quieter, but not empty. Because always, just beneath your thoughts, the wind moves gently. And the water flows. The path unfolds before you like a ribbon unspooling in slow motion, each step matched by the rustle of myrtle behind you and the promise of cooler shadows ahead. The air here feels newly minted, as if the sun, sliding ever lower, has changed its recipe. More breeze, less heat, a hint of stillness folded into each breath. You step toward the rectangular basin now, its surface unbroken, reflecting not just the sky but your quietness. This pool doesn't beckon with sound or movement. It waits, calmly, like a thought you're not ready to finish yet. You descend 3 shallow steps, the stone cool under your feet, and sit at the edge of the basin. Its walls are lined with dark marble, the edges softened by decades of wind and fingertip. You lean over slightly and see that the bottom is shallow, tiled with small square pieces in alternating blues, midnight, turquoise, sea glass. At the far end, water seeps in through a mouth hidden behind a carved stone screen. You wouldn't notice it if you didn't know to look. Even the entry of water here is humble, quiet, meant not to impress but to sustain. Mainstream historical fact: pools like these weren't merely ornamental. They were used to cool the surrounding environment through evaporation and to reflect light into shaded structures nearby. Positioned strategically, these basins doubled as temperature regulators and nighttime lanterns. Moonlight reflecting off the surface would illuminate garden paths without flame. Even their proportions were mathematical, designed to capture the sky in perfect balance with the walls around them. A pomegranate blossom floats across the basin's surface, catching a gust of breeze and spinning once before slowing to a halt. You watch it, mesmerized by how effortlessly the garden uses motion in place of sound. No fountains erupt, no birds call here, just the slow dance of petals and the muted hush of stone remembering sun. You shift slightly and let your fingers brush the water's edge. It clings to your skin coolly, then slips away. You imagine the countless evenings people have sat right here, watching the sky shift in the mirrored basin. You wonder what secrets they whispered, what dreams they cast like pebbles into the surface, hoping for ripples. Fringe tidbit: in some Persian palaces, visitors were asked to sit quietly beside reflection pools before entering indoor chambers, especially those used for poetry recitations or music. It was a kind of sensory reset, a way to wash the noise of the outside world from your ears and prepare the soul for gentler sounds. A pool wasn't just water, it was transition. You lie back gently, your head resting on a step, and watch the real sky above shift colors. It's no longer pale gold, it's burnished now, like the edges of parchment. The breeze thickens slightly, bringing with it the scent of stone warmed all day and now surrendering its heat. You inhale deeply. It smells like retreat. Historians still argue whether the pools were designed more for function or for the spiritual experience of reflection. Some claim they were born from desert necessity, a way to collect water and cool the body. Others believe they were built to anchor the self in contemplation, a mirror to both sky and soul. But perhaps, like most things in this garden, they simply do both, and quietly so. A light joke turns in your mind. If you installed a reflection pool in your office, you'd probably never get anything done, except for some serious existential staring. Outlook meeting declined. I'm communing with my tile basin. You smile and rise, the stone cool against your fingertips. As you step away from the basin, you notice the shadows have changed again. They lean longer now, stretching across the path ahead in softened lines that move with the breeze like pulled threads. The air tastes faintly of cardamom and stone. You're not sure where the cardamom came from, but it feels right. You follow the path as it rounds a gentle corner, passing a low archway carved into the garden wall. Through it lies another space, smaller, enclosed, sunken by just a step. You pause at the threshold, sensing something quieter inside. A tiny courtyard, no water, no wind, just a stillness so complete it feels like velvet. You enter. This is a dry chamber, not parched, just absent of movement. A stone bench curves along one wall framed by climbing vines. On the ground, square tiles alternate in shade from age and wear. A single rose bush blooms in the center, petals pale and folded, as if even their color learned how to whisper. You sit on the bench and let the silence wrap around you. Not a silence of absence, but a silence of completion, as if the garden has said what it came to say and now sits with you in companionable quiet. The wind doesn't reach here, but you can still hear it, far away, brushing through the cypress, turning petals in the pool, and guiding water gently through the unseen channels below. Because the wind always remembers, and the water always flows. You leave the dry courtyard slowly, as if stepping out of a dream you're not quite finished having. Your fingers trail along the vine-draped wall as you pass beneath the arch again, and the moment you emerge, the breeze greets you like an old friend. Soft, familiar, content. The contrast is gentle but distinct, like slipping from warm stillness into the sigh of a page being turned. The air carries the faintest scent of rose, cooler now, tinged with dust and distant fig. You return to the main path, but it feels different than before, not because it's changed, but because you have. You've begun to feel the garden's breath as your own, rising and falling with the rhythm of stone and leaf. You walk in step with the shadows now, and they reward you with their secrets. The sun has tilted further west, And with it, the garden begins its subtle shift into evening. You round another vine-covered corner and find yourself facing a wide, shallow structure you haven't yet seen. It's a platform, slightly raised, with wide-open archways on three sides, and a tiled floor that glimmers faintly in the slanted light. The structure seems to hum with purpose, not loudly, but like a bell long since rung. You step inside and feel it. Cooler air, coiled in the space like a gentle current waiting to unfurl. Mainstream historical fact. These semi-enclosed platforms, often called iwan, were key features in Persian garden architecture. Half pavilion, half porch, they were aligned with wind and water channels to function as natural cooling chambers. Thick walls and open archways created a constant draft, while stone floors absorbed daytime heat and released it slowly, keeping the space temperate as the outside temperature changed. It was not passive architecture, it was active partnership with the elements. You walk to the center of the space, and beneath your feet, the tiles cool your skin through the soles of your sandals. Each one is a slightly different shade of blue or green, like water caught in different stages of reflection. A trickling sound draws your eye downward. Yes, beneath the platform, a qanat vent opens into a stone-lined trough. Air flows from it, slow and steady, scented faintly with underground water and cool stone. It brushes against your ankle and coils upward like a ribbon. You sit at the edge of the vent, feeling the air curl up around you. It's not forceful. It's insistent in the gentlest way, like a child tugging your sleeve to show you something small but sacred. You close your eyes and breathe it in, the kind of cool that doesn't bite, the kind that remembers winter but prefers now. Fringe tidbit. In especially hot regions, qanat vents were sometimes perfumed with bundles of dried herbs, mint, rose petals, or citrus peel, placed near the air inlets. As the wind passed through the channels, it picked up the scent and delivered it throughout the garden. Guests would speak of the invisible roses or airborne oranges that arrived without ever seeing a blossom. You smile at the thought, wondering how many generations of gardeners perfected such invisible luxuries. How many walked barefoot across these same tiles, leaned into the same breeze, waited for the same scent to bloom unseen. Historians still argue whether these structures were built primarily for comfort or for ritual. Some argue they were designed as summer lounges, reading spaces, or rest stops between longer garden walks. Others believe they held ceremonial importance, used for reflection, mourning, or stargazing during solstice nights. But standing here, wrapped in wind that seems to know your name, it feels like they were meant for presence, for being here. Nothing more, nothing less. A light joke curls through your thoughts. If your office break room had a qanat vent and a mint breeze, you'd probably quit emails and start composing couplets. Zero productivity, maximum poetic vibes. You rise and move to one of the outer archways, leaning against the carved column. From here, you can see a wide swath of the garden. The cypress shadows long now, the hedges softened by twilight's approach. Far off, a pair of birds settle in the branches of a pomegranate tree. One chirps once, then silence returns like a tide. The breeze shifts slightly, drawn through the iwan's open archways in a slow arc. You move to the next opening, watching the wind shape the leaves of a fig tree in the corner courtyard. Behind you, the qanat whispers on, unhurried, like a heartbeat several rooms away. You walk out the far side of the platform, following the channel that spills from its base. It glides over the low garden wall, then curves again around a planting bed of basil and late-blooming jasmine. The basil releases scent with every footstep. You walk slowly, savoring it, until you reach a marble basin, small, round, cupped in stone, catching the spillover in a soft splash. You kneel beside it and touch the water, still cool, still clean, still moving. You stay for a long moment, hand resting on the basin's edge, eyes drifting toward the darkening leaves. You can't tell where the breeze ends anymore and where the water begins. And maybe that's the point. Because always, no matter the hour or the wind, the water flows. You rise from the marble basin slowly, fingers dripping into the fragrant basil at its edge. The leaves seem to shiver in response, not from chill, but as if acknowledging your touch. The path ahead is less defined now, more gravel than stone, more invitation than instruction. You follow it without question. The wind is still with you, but quieter now, almost conspiratorial, curling around your ankles, slipping beneath your sleeves, brushing the back of your neck like an old friend telling you a secret with no words. The path opens onto a wide terrace. It's elevated just slightly above the rest of the garden, and from here you get your first real glimpse of the garden's whole shape, not as a flat plan, but as a living, breathing mosaic. You pause, and the view settles into your chest like a warm sigh. A long central channel cuts the space below, flanked by trees in mirrored symmetry. Pools gleam like softened mirrors. Pergolas float on vines. Breezes move as if rehearsed, weaving through corridors of scent and shadow. You walk to the edge of the terrace and sit on the low stone railing, one leg bent beneath you, the other dangling slightly above a bed of lemon balm below. The breeze up here is stronger, unshaped by hedges, freer to carry the layered smells of water, warm fig, and old stone up to where you sit. You inhale deeply. It's not intoxicating, it's grounding. Mainstream historical fact. Terraces were a common feature in more elaborate Persian gardens, used not only for elevation, but for cooling and control. Their placement allowed greater air circulation, collected cooler nighttime temperatures, and in many cases gave guests or residents a place to observe the order of the garden, a principle drawn directly from Zoroastrian cosmology and the concept of harmony between the elements. You trace the shape of the channels below with your eyes, the slow looping arms of water that disappear into alcoves, the geometric perfection of beds planted with citrus, and the gentle, slow-moving humans in the garden's corners. An elderly couple walks slowly, the woman stopping to adjust a vine. A child crouches by a lily pool, fascinated by the insects dancing on its surface. You see them as part of the garden, not intruding but participating, like leaves or light. A light joke wafts through your thoughts. If rooftop bars were modeled after Persian terraces, happy hour might turn into quiet contemplation hour, and instead of cocktails, they'd hand you a fig and a breeze, zero noise complaints, maximum contentment. Behind you, the terrace structure forms a semi-enclosed sitting room, its walls open at the top, its corners filled with potted myrtle and citron. You step inside and feel the temperature drop a few degrees. Not because of any tricks or tech, just the magic of orientation and air. One wall has a carved screen, not for seeing through, but for breathing through. The holes are small, star-shaped, and when the wind passes through, they shape it into a low whisper. You sit near it and let the breeze trace soft lines along your cheeks. The room hums faintly like it remembers poems. Fringe tidbit. Some garden terrace structures were built with resonating chambers hidden in the walls, small cavities that would amplify wind as it passed through, creating a low humming sound similar to a conch shell. These weren't decorative flourishes. They were designed to tune the garden's silence, to make the air itself part of the atmosphere. You rest your head against the carved pillar and close your eyes. The garden doesn't disappear, it just shifts. The light behind your lids glows golden orange now. The breeze continues its path, curling around corners, dancing through citrus leaves, arriving here shaped and softened by everything it's passed through. You feel it in your lungs. It's the kind of air that resets something in you, something nameless. Historians still argue whether these upper terraces were meant for private reflection or public display. Some accounts describe them as stages for evening readings, royal gatherings, and political meetings. Others point to their seclusion, their orientation toward sunset, their acoustic privacy, and suggest a quieter purpose, a place for ending days, for letting the mind unwind in time with the light. And you're leaning toward the second option, because right now this terrace feels like a pause written in stone. You step back out onto the railing, watching as the shadows below stretch long across the tiled paths. The garden is changing again, transitioning into evening. You hear the distant clink of a watering can, the soft call of a dove, and somewhere from a channel unseen, the faintest trickle of water. You leave the terrace behind and follow a shaded stairwell downward, its steps worn smooth and lined with small potted rosemary. As you descend, the smell grows stronger, woody, fresh, slightly medicinal. It sharpens your senses even as the light fades around you. At the bottom, the air meets you again, cool, slower, heavier in the way dusk always is. You step out into a circular courtyard surrounded by arched alcoves, each with a single lantern flickering quietly inside. You sit in the center on a low domed stone and look up. The sky is turning violet. A single star has appeared. The garden doesn't pause, it transitions. And the wind, faithful and sure, flows on through the cooling branches. And beneath it, the water still moves. You linger in the circular courtyard as twilight deepens, the arches around you glowing gently with the flicker of oil lamps, their flames curving in time with the breeze like dancers practicing alone. The stone beneath you is still warm from the day, but the air now carries that unmistakable hush of approaching night. It's not silence, not exactly, but a layering of softer sounds, leaves brushing like fabric, water moving like breath. Somewhere close, the faint ping of a date dropping into dry earth. You rise and walk to one of the alcoves. Inside, the lantern's glow bounces off the plastered walls in trembling shadows, throwing shapes that look like vines or fingers or something half-dreamed. You don't need the light, not really, but it feels like the garden has lit it for you, like someone quietly remembered you'd be here and thought, let's make it feel like home. The path leading onward narrows slightly, hemmed in by tall hedges on either side. The moon's early glow finds you in slivers, peeking through the canopy above. The garden is transitioning again, no longer the domain of design and geometry, but something looser, older. This is the hour where everything learned to let go. You pass under a series of wooden arches, and above them, badgers, wind towers, rise like silent sentinels. Their purpose isn't dramatic anymore, you barely feel them. But that's the point. They've done their work already, pulling in the cool, moving it downward, tuning the temperature of the garden like fingers turning the keys of a harp. Mainstream historical fact: wind towers, or badgers, were one of Persia's most important architectural innovations. These vertical shafts, often topped with directional vents, use the natural movement of air to ventilate and cool buildings, even underground chambers. In garden structures, they were built tall enough to capture breezes above the walls and direct them downward, funneling air through channels that wound beneath pools and floors, releasing it where it was most needed. You pause at the base of one tower. Its stone surface is cool despite its height. You rest your palm against it and feel faintly the breath of air spilling from its hidden passage, a wind that has traveled through earth. It smells like lime and plaster and old water. You exhale, letting it find you, wrap around you, and move on. It doesn't cling, it continues. Fringe tidbit: some wind towers in historic estates were painted with thin films of lime wash infused with rosewater. As wind passed through the walls, the scent would intensify briefly, then disappear. These were sometimes called sighing towers, not because of sound, but because the breeze left behind only the ghost of its scent. You smile at that, even as you move past the last arch and enter another narrow garden lane. Here, pomegranate trees twist low over your path, their trunks older than any you've seen so far. A few ripe fruits hang just above your head, and one is split open, revealing its jeweled interior like a secret too full to keep. Beneath it, the ground is stained ruby in the dust. You kneel beside it, tracing your finger through the stain. Sweet, earthy, honest. Historians still argue whether nightfall in Persian gardens was meant to be social or solitary. Some texts speak of evening gatherings, moonlit feasts, or music played under trellises laced with jasmine. Others describe individual walks, prayer, or reflection. But this lane, this moment, it feels made for one, for quiet breath and the subtle thrill of a breeze that's cooled 1,000 backs before yours. A light joke nudges at your mind. If you tried to recreate this pomegranate path at home, you'd end up buying a scented candle called Mystic Orchard, lighting it once and still somehow managing to spill juice on your couch. Zero ancient elegance, full modern chaos. You walk further, and the breeze tightens again, reshaped by hedges into a single, steady stream. It passes through a screen made of carved brick, mashrabiyah, a pattern of geometric cuts that filters light and air in equal measure. You stand before it, letting the patterned shadows fall across your chest, your arms, your cheek. It feels ceremonial, like the garden giving you one last benediction before night fully arrives. Ahead, you see the silhouette of another Iwan, smaller than the one you visited earlier. This one is facing west, where the last blush of sunset paints the sky in long bands of gold and ash. You walk toward it, the crunch of gravel giving way to cool tile once more. You step into the structure and immediately feel the air shift. A light pressure drop, like entering a cathedral. It's empty, save for one long bench, and a channel of water running just along the back wall, whispering its slow conversation with the wind. You sit, and you listen. There's no fountain, no drip, just motion. The kind of motion that happens when nothing interrupts it, when water, gravity, and design all agree on what should happen next. You lean your head back against the stone. The stars are out now, barely visible in the wash of dusk, but present. The garden hums around you, not louder, just deeper. You're aware of everything at once. The chill in the air, the lingering warmth in the stone, the curve of breeze through the arches, and the endless current of water moving still like a lullaby without an end. And through it all, as always, the wind moves gently, and the water flows. You sit a while longer in the Iwan, watching the stars grow bolder above the garden walls. At first, they arrive one by one, timid and far away. But then they gather in quiet clusters, steadily, confidently, as if the garden has summoned them to complete the ceiling. The sky darkens, but not with finality. More like velvet being drawn over a lantern. The lantern's still there, just hidden, and the breeze knows it too. It shifts again, slower now, as if winding down for the night, careful not to wake the trees. You step back onto the path, and the tile beneath your feet is cooler now, not jarring, just honest. The garden at night doesn't pretend to be day, it embraces the difference. The shadows deepen, but the paths remain clear. The glow of oil lanterns tucked into wall niches casts halos that touch the stones like soft fingertips. You follow their trail. This section of the garden feels narrower, more maze-like, but in that comforting way that lets you lose yourself without ever getting lost. The hedges are taller here, and the scent has shifted again, more jasmine, less citrus. You reach a small stone footbridge arching over a dry channel, its bed lined with pebbles that chime faintly beneath the wind. You cross, each step giving a soft crunch like distant footsteps following your own. But you're alone here, or perhaps never really alone, just joined by quiet things. Mainstream historical fact. Many Persian gardens had nighttime corridors designed to guide visitors through by moonlight alone. White tiles, pale gravel, and light-reflecting foliage were used to illuminate paths without flame. Gardeners even chose night-blooming flowers and silver-flecked plants like artemisia and moonflower, not for their daytime beauty, but for their role in the garden's afterlight. You pause beneath a trellis where the moonflowers have begun to open, delicate petals unfurling in pale spirals, catching light in a way that feels like breath. The scent is soft and unfamiliar, something between vanilla and earth. You lean closer, and for a moment, the world tightens down to one white petal, one thin breeze, and the almost imperceptible movement of air between them. You remember now, this isn't a garden built only for the sun. It's one designed for every hour. Fringe tidbit. In some estates, special night walks were taken in complete silence. Guests were discouraged from speaking or even clearing their throats. It was believed that the garden's night rhythms, leaf tremors, wind sighs, water breath, could only be heard clearly in human stillness. Those who broke the quiet were gently ushered out to the outer courtyards, away from the deepest hush. You continue down the path, slower now, letting your hands brush the edges of night-cooled leaves. A cypress drops a single needle into your hair. You don't remove it. It feels like a stamp, one of those invisible approvals that says you've been here long enough to be trusted with the dark. A turn in the path reveals another basin, this one smaller, nearly hidden, nestled beneath a low wall. No water moves in it tonight, but it holds water still, like a cup offered skyward. The reflection inside is flawless. Moon, cypress, a faint passing cloud. You sit beside it and the quiet deepens further. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were designed with equal care for day and night. Some assert that the focus was primarily on the golden hours, sunrise and afternoon light. Others point to architectural features, moon-facing iwans, wind towers calibrated for nighttime air, that suggest the garden's second life began after sunset. What's certain is this: someone stood in this exact spot long ago, listening to the same wind, watching the same moon ripple in still water. And they thought, let's make this eternal. A light joke tiptoes into your thoughts. If you brought a flashlight into this garden, the moonflowers might judge you. And honestly, they'd be right. Zero vibe, too much wattage. You lie back fully now, head against the cool ground, staring up past the garden walls. The stars are fully awake. You can name none of them, and it doesn't matter. Their presence is the point, not their pedigree. The wind returns, slower still. An old lullaby sung by stone and sky. It slips through the hedges, ruffles your collar, curls around your ankles like a cat preparing for sleep. And somewhere, just out of sight, you hear it again, the garden's oldest sound. The water still flows. You rise from the ground slowly, as though gravity itself has softened for the evening. The world feels lower now, quieter, tuned down to a frequency meant only for those who have stayed long past the hour when most would leave. You brush dust from your sleeve, though the dust here feels ceremonial somehow, fine, cool, and touched by moonlight. You follow the path again, its edges blurred by creeping thyme and moss, and as your footsteps fall, they seem to disappear rather than echo, absorbed by the earth-like secrets it already knew. The path draws you into a circular courtyard, perhaps the smallest one yet. It's enclosed on all sides by vine-covered walls, open only to the stars above. The wind doesn't rush here. It arrives as a hush, like someone drawing in a breath and holding it lovingly in their chest. In the center stands a single marble bowl, waist-high, filled to the brim with perfectly still water. No trickle, no ripple, just a polished mirror catching the sky. You approach it slowly, reverently, and peer inside. And there you are, not as you appear in daylight, but as the garden sees you, softened at the edges, eyes dimmed with calm, posture curved like one of its trees. The stars shimmer behind your reflection, and the moon, sharp and silver, rests on your shoulder like a friend who needed no invitation. Mainstream historical fact. Persian gardens were often designed to include celestial reflection points, spaces where water and stone framed the night sky, allowing visitors to observe stars and planetary motion. These spaces weren't observatories in the formal sense, but spiritual, reflective chambers where architecture and astronomy touched, a way to feel the sky more than study it. You sit on the edge of the circular basin and glance upward. The vines that scale the walls are studded with blossoms, mostly closed now, but a few brave petals remain open, catching silver light instead of sun. The smell is faint but persistent. You close your eyes, and in that moment, everything hums, not loudly, just truly. Fringe tidbit. Some ancient texts suggest that architects and gardeners of Persian estates used astrological alignments to plan parts of their design, placing pools to reflect specific constellations during certain seasons, or aligning trees with the path of the moon at solstice. Whether this was strictly mystical or simply poetic tradition is debated, but the precision of the alignments is undeniable. The gardens were timepieces as much as sanctuaries. A soft breath escapes you, maybe a sigh, maybe just the garden borrowing your exhale. Either way, the basin does not ripple. Its stillness is complete, and it reminds you of something essential. Stillness does not mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening carefully. You stand once more and step away from the water, following the crescent of wall that leads to a final narrow opening. It's framed by two trees that lean toward each other, branches entwined like old companions parting reluctantly. You step through them, and the space opens again, this time not into a structured garden, but into a wild fringe of low grass and open earth. Beyond this, the world, hills, sky, the outline of mountains in the distance black against the stars. You walk a few more paces and turn back. The garden behind you is now framed perfectly in moonlight. The walls silvered, the arches lit from within, the vines curling like the strokes of a forgotten script. You can hear the wind pass through it all, its voice slower now, content. And yes, beneath that, just as soft as it began, the sound of water still flowing. Historians still argue whether the purpose of Persian gardens was first and foremost spiritual, political, or sensual. Were they paradises designed to echo divine order? Were they statements of wealth and power? Were they simply places to sit and sip something sweet in the heat of the day? Maybe all of them. But standing here in the dark with the garden breathing behind you, it becomes clear, whatever the reason, the result is peace. A final light joke floats into your mind. If your city had even one garden like this, your screen time would plummet. Goodbye scrolling, hello staring at vines and wondering if the moon approves of your life choices. You smile and turn back toward the garden one last time. The wind curls past your ear. The water even now flows somewhere behind a vine, beneath a stone, beneath your memory. It will be flowing long after you've gone. After all, this is story again. And you? You are part of the stillness now. Wind down. And so you rest here at the garden's edge, held in the hush of moving air and quiet water. The breeze has softened, the scent of jasmine fading into memory, and the stars continue their slow silver drift above. The path behind you lies cool and still, its stones warmed by centuries, its shadows longer than time itself. You feel it now, that delicate weight of peace, not heavy, not loud, but full, like the pause before a perfect breath. Let the water's whisper stay with you, let the garden's rhythm settle into your chest. You don't need to remember the path. It remembers you. The vines will shift, the breeze will return, and the channels will carry water long after your footsteps fade. Close your eyes now. Let the sky rest above you. Let the silence do the speaking. Let your thoughts float like petals on a pond, guided by a current older than worry. The wind is gentle. The garden is quiet. And the water always flows.